Perfect love casts out all fear. And if we think about if there's a God who loves us just because he loves us, not because of who we are, not because of what we're achieving, not because of how good and commandment, whatever, has nothing to do with us, but everything to do with him, just because he loves his creation. It's like you paint a picture and you're a great artist, but you have one that's your favorite and you just love that picture. I don't know, because you made it. I don't know, somehow God has that kind of affection for us. And if we can somehow just take in how much he loves us, that will cause the fear to melt away, all kinds of fear, when we just can rest in his love for us.
Stephen, what was the thing that made you even investigate Jesus as a Jewish person? How did that even begin?
I was a freshman at the University of Illinois, definitely not looking for Jesus, but looking for answers about life. My grandmother had just died. Why are we here? What is life? What is death? I'm sitting in the office of a Jewish professor for a writing course who had assigned us this big paper. I was planning to quit school. So when he said, "How you doing on your paper?" I said, "I haven't chosen a subject yet." "All right, I'll talk to you. Wait your turn." He's talking to the other students, and out of nowhere, I get this crazy thought. It really grabbed me, and I interrupted him. I said, "Hey, I know what I'll write on. I'll write on why the Jews at the time of Jesus didn't believe he was the Messiah." It came out of nowhere, and that started me on a journey I never expected.
Did you know anything about Jesus, though?
No, I knew the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol. I didn't know anything about Jesus, really.
So what did you think? Did you have any presuppositions about why Jewish people didn't believe in Jesus?
All I knew was he's on the other side of the line in the sand. He's not our guy. We don't think about him. We don't talk about him. We don't believe in him. He's not, Jewish people just don't do that. But that's all I really knew.
So then you start researching it. And
so I got a Bible, and I had to see, what did the Jewish people in the first century expect? Why didn't they think Jesus fit that picture, that portrait? So I'm starting to look at all these prophetic texts, these passages in the Hebrew Bible that somebody said are about the Messiah. And this is new territory for me. In my synagogue, we didn't study that. We didn't, I'm reading books explaining these things by Jewish authors and Christian authors and secular historian text, type guys. Instead of my questions diminishing, they just kept multiplying. First of all, there's just way more to this story than I ever expected. And there's like a plausible case here that I don't really want to consider. And so I thought, let me go hear both sides and interview some experts. So I called a couple rabbis and I called a couple Christian pastors to give equal time. I met with them one at a time. And, they all tried to be helpful. They weren't, but they all tried.
None of them were helpful?
One guy,
Okay.
One of the Christian pastors was actually very interesting. I walk into his office and he says, let me ask you this question to start out with. Are you asking me these questions for your paper that you're writing or for you? Very honestly, I said both. I remember him at the end saying two important things. One, he said, let me tell you about a friend of mine, shared the last name that I have, Katz. He's a guy named Art Katz. He told me this story of Art Katz talking with this rabbi and looking at one of the prophecies in the Bible. And the guy every time he would ask the guy a question, the guy would go get a commentary off the shelf. And then finally he asked him one thing, and then he stops the guy's hand and said, give me your answer. Stop with the commentaries. I want to, just based on what the text says. So it was an interesting story, got my attention. Then at the end he said to me, Steve, he called me that, you're never going to know if this is true about Jesus unless you do something. You ask him into your life. He says, because if it's just a myth, if it's just this legend, this old story that's got nothing to it, you have nothing to worry about. Nothing's going to change. Mm-hmm. Your life will go on. No big deal. But if he's real and you really sincerely want him in your life, you're going to know it. And I walked out of there thinking about that, and it made sense, but obviously it's kind of threatening. But it was a very interesting challenge.
But why do you say threatening?
Because Jesus is not for Jews, so I thought. I didn't know what it would mean for me, but I knew, my family would turn inside out and upside down, and I didn't know what would happen in my family, with my friends, with the community. Just, it was sort of against any part of who I was at that time. It just wasn't natural.
And I'm really curious what some of those rabbis that you talked to, what were their perspectives?
One of the rabbis, who I think was a Holocaust survivor, he just got really angry with me. Angry that I was even writing this paper. He said, I find that subject abhorrent. I don't want to talk about it with you, but I'll recommend a few books. Yeah, and I already had those books actually for my paper. So yeah, he just couldn't find it within himself to even talk about that subject. The other rabbi was the Hillel rabbi, and he took all the time in the world with me. Nice guy. I'm not sure he was a believer in God, I don't know. But he just talked about first century sects, of Judaism, and there you had this and you had that, and this was another group, and it was a little bit beyond my historical understanding at the time, a little over my head, but, tried to help me understand, yeah, this was one, but it wasn't, real, or it faded away, or it, et cetera, et cetera.
What were some of the things that really did grab you as far as, leading you to a conclusion?
It was all about messianic prophecy. Those passages became really compelling, obviously, or not obviously to maybe many people, is Isaiah chapter 53, because this is something I didn't grow up with. And seeing that description of this servant of God who is born with nothing special, kind of humble beginnings, and then lives a good life, and it says dies for people's sins, and there's hints of resurrection in this passage. The whole thing paints this picture of a character, and you got to ask, well, who is this, or who was this? And that was very compelling and mysterious, and something I had to continue kind of just reapproaching and trying to figure out.
Was there a certain point where you made up your mind about what you thought about all of this?
Of course. I finished my paper, and I quit school. And I thought, I was going to try to be Bob Dylan. That didn't, that wasn't me. And I go over to my, I'll say my blonde girlfriend's house about 3-4 months later. So she says, hey, guess what happened last night? Jesus and I got together. Yeah, she didn't want to scare me with a bunch of religious talk. So I didn't know what that meant. It's like, okay, if that makes you happy. She invited me one time to go see, her brother was the bus driver for a singing Christian group. They would give presentations in churches. They were coming to our hometown. So I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know what happens in a church. I don't know if I want to step foot inside a church. So I said to my girlfriend, I'll tell you what, I'll come on 2 conditions. I'm not going to drive with you, and I'm not going to sit with you. It's like, if I want to leave early, I can leave. So I went there. It was very interesting, to say the least. They sang a medley of a bunch of songs, none of which I knew. But then the guy got up, one of the members of the band got up and kind of talked for a few minutes. And it was very down to earth, and it made sense. And something clicked with me. He said, you might have a problem, or you might have something in your life that bugs you. And you really want to change it, and you keep trying to change it, and you can't. And you talk to your friends about it to get some help. They give you advice, but it doesn't make any difference. Then he said, maybe you go read a book on the subject, maybe self-help or whatever. And then he said, now it's as big as a mountain in your life. Yeah. And his big punchline was that only Jesus can move mountains, something like that. This is a lot of years later, and you can see, obviously, I remember this little 5-minute talk the guy gave, because in my life, I would say, depressed. I was cynical. Life made no sense. I was looking for answers and couldn't find them. That was my problem. And I couldn't get rid of it, no matter what I did. So what he said made sense to me. And the more I learned and the more I observed the lives of those who claimed to be Christians, my girlfriend and others, I saw something there. And anyway, a lot of things convinced me this thing must be true.
I actually really love your reflection about the church, because there were things that culturally were super, new for you.
Right.
And even, in Judaism, there's a huge spectrum of the way people culturally express their faith, and same thing in Christian traditions.
Right.
But that message of just like, hey, we all are struggling and looking for answers, that there's something really human at the core
Right.
of our faith in Jesus that transcends culture, and
Yeah.
actually that there's many cultural expressions of our faith. So once you sort of got to that point of like, I think this is true,
Yeah.
where did you take that?
She invites me the next night to go see them in another church. I'm like, no, I'm not going. So I stayed home. I was home alone. And it was like, why am I not there? Why am I here? This is true. No, it's not true.
Yeah.
It was just this inward struggle. And anyway, so I didn't go. Then she invited me. They were going to be somewhere else another time. We wound up driving from Illinois to Dayton, Ohio. So I agreed to go. We drive to Dayton, Ohio. There's some odd church there. I remember it was a little weird. But at that point, I was already, I would say, a believer in God. And I was saying, God, if you want me to take this step, if you want me to do something about Jesus, I said, I cannot do that. I cannot, I will not, whatever it was. So I said, if you want me to go up, because I knew by then at the end of their musical presentation, they would invite people to come up and talk and pray and whatever. I said, if you want me to go up, I said, you need to pick me up out of my seat and make my legs move, because I can't do it on my own. It was kind of a strange prayer. So at the end, as I predicted, they had that thing. My girlfriend, when she was on a phone call with her sister, she said, hey, I want you to pray for my Jewish boyfriend. Pray that he would come to...
Wait, but did you know she said that? Or
No,
she
I
privately?
didn't know that.
Yeah,
No,
privately
she told me much later.
Yeah.
And her sister's response was, because her sister went to Northwestern, had a lot of Jewish friends, she said, Laura, don't get your hopes up.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they were praying for me, as I found out later. But anyway, at the end of that concert, I went up there and I met with my girlfriend's brother. We go to some little room. He says, hey, what's going on? How you doing?
Wait.
Yeah,
Hold on.
sorry.
So you went up.
I did.
So did you feel like your legs just carried you? Again?
I mean, I can't say it was a miracle or supernatural.
Yeah. But something gave you
I got up.
the momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up and he said, hey, what's going on? I said, I don't know, Joel, but I want to know Jesus. That's what I said. And so he sat down and he went through a few Bible verses to make sure I understood what it was all about and what that meant. And then he asked me, he said, how do you think your family's going to respond to this? And I don't remember my answer specifically. I knew if I had taken a half a minute, I would have said, oh, it's going to be a lead balloon. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be a disaster. But in that moment, it's kind of like it didn't matter, because I knew what I had to do and I knew what mattered in that moment. So I prayed with him to acknowledge Jesus as our Messiah and who died for for our sins, etc. Then I went and told my girlfriend, and it's been a wild journey ever since.
How did your family take it?
Terribly. I waited, so that was in like early summer. My birthday is at the end of summer, so I was going to go home for my birthday. And I purposefully waited over the course of that summer because I wanted to give them the chance, and also maybe to validate for myself, are they going to see anything different in my life? Anything changed in my life because of this supposed reality of God in my life? Is this real? Is this not real? Are they going to recognize? And they did. Over the course of the summer, they're like, wow, you're communicating more with us. And I was telling them I love them, which, we had had a bit of a strained relationship just because we did. And so they were saying things to notice a difference. So then I went home. And when I went home, I was so nervous to tell them of my faith. I mean, like really nervous, bordering on fear. I decided, I'd read in the Bible, when things are big, fast and pray. So I'm like, okay, I'll fast. And the only way, being a Jew, the only way I know how to fast is like Yom Kippur. I didn't realize Christians, when they fast, it's like, we get to drink tea, we have orange juice, We can
I know
just skip.
like, you don't even brush your teeth.
Yeah, we can skip chocolate, whatever. But no, the Jewish way of fasting is, hey, don't brush your teeth. Nothing goes in. So I fast that way, no water, no food for 3 days. I go home. We're sitting in there, just me and my folks in the family room. And I don't know exactly how I started out, but I wind up telling them I came to believe that Jesus is our Messiah. Well, right away, my mother's crying. She said 2 things to me. She said, first of all, who brainwashed you? Oh. You know, who did this? Somebody spoon-fed you something.
Yeah.
How did this happen? The other thing she said, you probably don't remember this. It was 1975. The United Nations had just voted to equate, they passed a resolution to equate Zionism with racism. And she said, Stephen, there's going to be a new wave of anti-Semitism in this country, and you're just trying to hide.
Ooh.
My dad, I hear him walk down the stairs. He can't sleep, so I'm tired. I want to go to sleep, but it's like, I better go down and talk to him. So I follow him down, and he says, I don't get it. He starts naming my friends. You know, this one goes to college and studies accounting, and this one studies engineering, and this one studies this and that and the other thing, business. My son goes to college and comes home and says he believes in Jesus. He says, I don't get it. He said, you're putting a wall up between you and the rest of the family. And a couple months later, they had my uncle come over. He was a rabbi, send me down to the basement with him so he could straighten me out. For years, they sent me books on Judaism. It was just this big thing.
If we're Jewish and Jews don't believe in Jesus, like, okay, and there is no God, why does it matter to be Jewish? Like right. What are the actual viable options? The viable options are, we're Jews, we're loyal to our people, but there is no God. Everything is here by accident. It's survival of the fittest. So what does it matter that we're Jews? It's like totally irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
Why are we protecting this people group? Like, for what? It's all just science, you know? Then what's another option? Like, there is a God, there is a destiny for the Jewish people. It's not Jesus. Well, okay, then what is it? Where are we going? If then Jesus being the Messiah and the New Testament containing the answers to those questions about what is the destiny of our people.
So one, if you're religious, would be, well, there is a God, and our purpose is to keep the mitzvahs. You know, we keep the commandments. Okay, but for what? Where does that lead? Why are you doing it? To make God smile, or, you know, to try to gain merit for myself, to, you know, get to Gan Eden, get to heaven, whatever. The other framework would be, okay, so to fix the world, tikkun olam.
Why not just become a better person? Why not just become a good person and keep more, as you said, mitzvot, keep more commandments?
Yeah.
And maybe your life would have improved in a very similar way.
My grandmother was Orthodox. She was great. I was very close to her. You know, we had a great relationship. My family wasn't inclined to, we didn't keep a kosher home, you know, conservative synagogue, but not a kosher home. My parents were pretty decent people, but I just knew enough to know it was insufficient. I never really thought about it that much, but I knew for what my goals were in my own life, or what my aspirations, my dreams were, that somehow I was never getting there, or I was afraid to deeply go there, whatever the issues were. I just knew I needed something from outside myself in this life. I think with Jesus being the Messiah, you know, whatever happens on the intellectual level with the texts and the arguments and all that stuff, in the gut is where all the meaningful transactions happen, and, you know, and it's just against the Jewish gut to believe in Jesus.
Why? Well, Jesus was Jewish. Why? Why that gut reaction?
You know, you can talk about theological objections. Jews believe in one God and Christians believe in three. Or you can say Christians persecuted Jews. You know, the church was bad to us, murdered us, and lots of bad things were called us Christ killers, etc. But probably underneath or above all of that stuff, it's a loyalty issue. It's a loyalty issue. If I'm a good Jew, I'm loyal to the Jewish community, I'm loyal to our authorities, I'm loyal to the way I was raised, and I just don't go there. It's kind of simple, but it's a very deep thing.
there has been a lot of persecution in Jewish history, and there are reasons why as Jewish people we feel like we have to stick together.
Right.
But if Jesus is the Jewish Messiah and his message has reached the nations, then faith in him actually strengthens the calling of the Jewish people, the mission of the Jewish people, instead of diminishing it.
Oh, absolutely. This is kind of a silly analogy, but I've likened what it's like for a Jewish person, or in this case, I'll talk about myself, to pre-believing in Jesus and receiving him, and afterwards, kind of like a toaster on your counter. What do I mean? You got a toaster in your kitchen, it's not plugged into the wall, and it's just sitting there. So it's not, it has a function, it has a purpose, but it's just not working because it's not plugged into the electricity. Well, as a Jewish person, way back when, Mount Sinai, etc., God had and has a purpose for us. But when we're not in relationship to him, we're just sitting there on the counter. We don't get it. We don't understand it. We don't know what it is. And we're just going through life that way.
Yeah, we're not plugged in.
But when we get plugged in, all of a sudden it's like, now I know what life is about and what I should be doing.
I love that. What would you say to somebody who is walking through that right now, who's watching this?
I would say preserving the relationships. Do whatever you can. Family is family. Preserve those relationships. But getting back to the loyalty issue, it's more important to be loyal to the God of our people than simply to our people. So there's tension there at times. And it's been that way in every generation. With God's help and prayerfully, and get advice from people you trust, but walk through it carefully. Don't make rash judgments. Don't just give in to ultimatums. If your family gives you ultimatums, not a good idea to react quickly. So yeah, there's some kind of common sense practices you can put into play.
Stephen, I could talk to you for hours and ask many more questions over a cup of coffee, and we'll have to do this again. We're here at Mosheva, which is a coffee shop owned and operated by Jews for Jesus in Greenwich Village. And I'm mentioning that because if you're ever in Greenwich Village, if you're in our neck of the woods in New York City, please come by, have a cup of coffee, tell us you saw this video. We'd love to meet you. Leave a comment. I want to see what you guys think about Stephen's journey. If you relate to any of it, if you disagree with any of it, and subscribe, share this video so that we can reach more people with the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. God bless. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great.